Welcome to On Texas Football. Time for State of the Program, brought to you by our friend Adam Lowy, the Lowy Law Firm. Adam has a special offer for you guys a little bit later I want to mention. But first, let's talk a little Longhorn football. Gerry, Hamilton, CJ Vogel joining me each and every week. Big week ahead, just 3 days from now. Longhorns kick off at 3 o'clock against Clemson. The Longhorns favored now by 12 points, according to odds makers everywhere. But I tell you what, Gerry and CJ, this game is going to have multiple keys to it. We're going to talk about that a little bit right now and what we think those keys to the game are. We're also going to talk a little bit about portal recruiting and break that down for you in this episode of State of the Program. All right, Gerry, I'm going to start with you. Let's start with offensive keys to the game. What is your key to this game for Texas?
Yeah, it's turnovers in their own end of the field. I think giving a team momentum instead of making them earn it offensively. That's a big thing, and especially early in a game, right? I mean, this is a game where Clemson's coming in as a 12-point dog. You just said it. They're going to have jacked up energy. It's them against the world, as they're going to say it, us against the world, as they'll say it. And Dabo does a great job of getting his team fired up in that manner. So what Texas can't do is feed that. They can't feed that to the Clemson team. So it's turnovers in general, obviously in playoff games when it's winner or go home scenarios, but it's really the catastrophic turnovers. It's the pick sixes, it's the fumbles that go back for a touchdown, but it's the turnovers on your own end of the field. Because the difference between if you do that against an Oklahoma or a Michigan or somebody like that, they couldn't capitalize. Clemson will capitalize if you give them short fields. And it could be touchdowns against you because they have talented players on offense. So that's my number one key is you cannot give these guys momentum, give them the ball on your side of the field, else you could put yourself behind the 8 ball to start the game. So it's especially early as playing clean football.
I agree with that. I agree with turnovers being a key to it and a clean game, so to speak. I also think the run game is going to be absolutely important for Texas on offense. And when I say that, what is success in the run game? It's feeling like you actually have an opportunity to move the ball and doing so through the run game, at least periodically, right? Texas was suffocated against Georgia in the second half. Texas moved the ball up and down the field the first half against Georgia. The second half, it got difficult because they couldn't run the ball. It put Quinn Ewers in the position of him having to make all the plays instead of just some of the plays, right? Now, had some individual efforts by receivers, et cetera, but I think that and Stark and Quinn Ewers both talked about this on Monday at their press availability, the need for Texas to be more balanced from an offensive attack. And I don't care how that run game comes, whether it's extended handoffs that are actually passes to an Isaiah Bond or Matthew Golden or DeAndre Moore in the short passing game, or wide zone or duo, whatever they want to run. Texas needs to be able to find some tough yards with reasonably easy, low percentage risk plays. They don't need to make Quinn Ewers throw the ball 45 times or 40 times with a lot of long down and distance 3rd and 10s, because then that invites, in my opinion, your turnover position. CJ.
Real quick, I want to add to that. What'll be very interesting for all of us to watch and Texas fans to watch is, does Clemson go extra hat in the box to start the game? But now Georgia could do it because they had an All-American in Malachi Starks and Dan Jackson, who was, I believe, a third-team All-SEC safety, and was an experienced player. Clemson is inexperienced in the secondary. Can Clemson afford to go extra hat in the box early in this game and take their chances? That's something I'm going to watch, which plays into the run game.
Yeah, there's a lot of different pieces to this. How Clemson decides are they going to attack? Are they really going to rush Quinn Ewers? Pass protection is another key for this. How do you allay the fears of, say, a TJ Parker and slow him down? Clemson averaging 3 sacks a game right now themselves. CJ, what about you? What are some other factors or keys in this offensive situation that Texas finds themselves in this weekend against Clemson?
Yeah, I mean, to build off of that, do they add an extra hat to the box? Do they go kind of a 3 high look, right? Texas kind of stymied Texas as well The bridge for both of those and the way that Texas can have success against either one of those looks is the tight end spot. And that's Gunnar Helm for me. 78 snaps against Georgia. He had 2 targets. He had 1 catch, 11 yards. You look at where Texas has had success throwing the ball in the red zone this season. A lot of that is in direction of Gunnar Helm, right? He had the 2 touchdowns against Florida. He had that nice kind of extended play, find open space against Michigan early in the year when Quinn Ewers found him in the upper red area. That has to be part of the game plan for Texas. And I know that Texas had a lot of success throwing to DeAndre Moore and Matthew Golden against Georgia. That's great. 275 yards. But when that field gets condensed and teams in the playoffs can rely on those big cornerbacks, you have to find the mismatch over the middle. And that's Gunnar Helm, and that's what we've seen so far. Also, for Gunnar Helm, he's a big bridge, a guy that can help in the run game, create some holes off the left or the right side or coming across over the middle. You have to utilize him and run behind him in ways that create mismatches over the middle. I think that has to be a big focal point of the Texas offense this weekend.
You know, you're really right. Against Georgia, Georgia didn't just shut down Gunnar Helm. They also shut down the Texas running back receiving game. You know, those 2 things, CJ, if they see a resurgence of that, that could be a real spark to the Texas offense against Clemson. All right, let's talk about defense real quick next and the keys there. Look, CJ, I'm going to let you start and tell us your number one thing that Texas needs to do against Clemson, in your opinion.
Yeah, to me, it's all about containment of Cade Klubnik. Of course, we've talked at length about the athleticism that he has, the speed. He was a 200-meter guy in high school at Westlake, a guy that's made big-time plays with his legs. And, you know, it's not the overall, you know, kind of overriding factor of his game, but it is something that Texas will have to be wary about. Texas done great over the last 2 years, really, when you go back to Jalen Milroe, Jason Bean, Diego Pavia, Taylon Green. A lot of these guys look to run the ball first. Now, Cade will do that, but he'll also look to extend plays with his legs and use his arm as a result. And now Texas will be good in coverage in the back end. But for me, it's about those edge guys, keeping them in the pocket and not letting those legs extend a lot of plays to let guys come open down the field.
So containment, your number one defensive key of Cade Klubnik. What about yours, Gerry? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's generating pass rush with the front 4 and then 5-man blitzes, because Texas has generated 38 sacks this year without a high percentage of blitz calls. I mean, so that is very rare when you can generate that many sacks and that many quarterback pressures without dialing up many of the 6-man blitz packages. That's imperative against Cade Klubnik. It kind of falls into what CJ was saying, because if you have to bring the extra hat, that may be your spy at times. And if getting pressure with the front 4, and then if you occasionally bring the 5th, I think is going to be huge in this game, because that also helps you keep contained against Cade Klubnik with your linebackers. And again, I expect Colin Simmons. I expect these guys to have some pretty big games off the edge Saturday. But again, it's not having to force PK and Nanson's hands to blitz more than they really want to and get the same pressure. That's where they've been so successful this season.
It really is. I think y'all are both right. I mean, containing Cade Klubnik, getting a pass rush. They should be able to stop the run because Clemson has an injured running back right now. Mine's going to be a little bit different. Look, Quinn Ewers, on the flip side, has turned the ball over a little bit this year, especially late in the season. Cade Klubnik has not. He has not been a big turnover guy this year. And one of my keys to this game is Texas needs to bait him. That secondary, the experienced secondary of Michael Taft, Andrew Makuba, who are both extraordinarily familiar with him. You have Jahdae Barron, who we all know is a really smart football player. Manny Muhammad, Jalen Gilbo. Texas needs to bait him into something at least once in this game, because you think, I mean, turnovers are huge in this game, and I think Texas, I think Clemson's a good football team and all that. They've got to find a way. This Texas defense has to find a way to bait Cade Klubnik into something at some point in time, a key critical moment that turns maybe the tide, the momentum, keeps them from scoring, anything like that they can do. Just one little thing is going to be important there for the Texas defense. Overall, guys, your keys to this game, and I'm looking at it right now. Turnover margin, Gerry, has to be huge. You agree with that?
I do. Look, and I think you can play even in that if it's 1-1. I mean, I don't think Texas has to sit there and be a plus in this game because they're the better football team. But what they can't be is 3-1. They can't be a -2 in this game, especially if you're turnover in your own end or in a red zone going in, something that keeps the underdog having momentum behind their back. That's the key for me. Is yes. So you can play even in turnovers. I don't expect either of these teams to play a perfect game. I just don't think that would be the wrong expectation. But what you can't have is a sloppy game on the Texas side in terms of turnovers. Put 5 fumbles, even if you only lose 1, right? I mean, it's just can't put yourself in harm's way in this game because that's when you get upset in these types of games where you're a prohibitive favorite. You have to open the door. And very rarely does a team come in as a 2-touchdown dog and just whip your butt. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to open the door. Texas has to keep the door shut.
Yeah, I agree with that. Overall key for me, I think turnover margin is definitely a big one. Mine is disparity in run game. And what I mean by that is, look, Texas needs to rush for 150 to 200 or 125 to 200. I don't know what the real number is, right? But compared to Clemson, it needs to be relatively 2x. I mean, 125 to 50 or 60 all in with Cade Klubnik and their running back situation, which we know is they're dinged up right now. Texas needs to beat Clemson on the ground. If they can do that, they can dictate the pace of the game. They can dictate a lot more of what the action is going to look like. They take some of the risk out of the Texas offense and that turnover risk that we just talked about. Just a disparity in production of run game. Texas has to own the line of scrimmage. That's the best way I could put my biggest key to this game outside of turnovers. I really believe that. What are you going to say, Gerry?
Yeah, I was going to add the Phil Moffitt. There's a Phil Moffitt kind of number in there with what you're saying as well. Against Pitt, even though Clemson won 24-20, Clemson had 346 yards in that game, or right around there. Moffitt had 17 carries for 17 yards. In the ACC championship game, they only had 326 offensive yards against SMU. Moffitt had 13 for 28. If he doesn't have a productive day, that puts a lot on Klubnik because their second team back is out now too with an ACL.
Yep.
Yeah. CJ, what are your keys additionally to this game? We mentioned disparity in run game, turnover margin. What are you looking for?
It's going to sound pretty simple, but just a clean special teams game. And, I hate to look back at the kicking situation against Georgia, but, it wasn't just that. Punting hasn't been great. That's been well documented this year, but also the return game for Texas. Kickoff return to start the game, you get tackled at the 11. Now you got to go 89 yards, and you pick up a good 55 or so on that opening drive, and yet you turn the ball over and Georgia still gets good field position. That's doing your offense a disservice. But I'm looking at the kicking so far. Burt Auburn this year, 67%, 14 of 21. Nolan Hauser on the other side, look, he just made the big 56-yard field goal to win the ACC championship, but he's 3 of 6 on kicks beyond 40 yards this year, and he's overall 17 of 23. So there's a lot of room for misses and extra points left off the board for either team so far this year. For me, Texas have to protect well on punt. They're down 2 this year on blocks. That has to be a big focal point in games like this because to your point, Gerry, about turnovers and leaving short fields, no bigger play in college football can dictate who wins and loses a game like a block punt.
Yeah. A block punt is big. Special teams makes on field goals, obviously a clear one. I want to say this. I mean, I'm not so sure. I actually think the most important play of the entire Georgia-Texas game was a 4th down fake punt.
Yeah.
That turned the tide of that game late in it as well in the fourth quarter. So I agree with that. And speaking of the fourth quarter, Texas needs to finish, and they finished games relatively well this year. I really believe that. Sark's got them going really well in the fourth quarter. I think they need to get over some third quarter blues. We've talked about that. That's an important key for this game. But Gerry, you mentioned this in this morning's Coffee and Football. They also got to get off to a quick start.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't 6-3 can't be a quick start for Texas.
No.
It needs to be more like 10-0 or 13-3 or something. They need a quicker start in this game as well. I think there's a lot of factors that are going to play into it. It's a big game. We'll see where that goes. We want to talk a little bit about the portal next, but first I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Adam Lowy of the Lowy Law Firm. Each and every episode of State of the Program brought to you by Adam Lowy and his group. They've been helping injured Texans for the last 20 years. If you've been in an automobile accident of any kind, car wreck, truck wreck, 18-wheeler, ATV, give Adam and his group a shout. They offer a free, no-strings-attached consultation. That's loweylawfirm.com. Also, I want to mention this. Adam and his group are giving away 10 free tickets to the Texas Clemson game. Here's the rules or contest rules that Adam is putting out there on Twitter. All you have to do is contact them and reply to this tweet on Twitter, giving away 10 tickets to Clemson versus UT. 2 tickets per winner, so 5 total winners, and this has to be done by tomorrow morning. To participate, tell me your favorite moment from this season in this tweet. Winners announced tomorrow at 8 a.m. Again, thanks, Adam, for getting folks opportunities to win free tickets to the Clemson UT game this weekend. Again, Adam Lowy, our sponsor of the State of the Program. All right, portal guys, Texas has had 5 guys on campus now that we're aware of. 3 of them have committed. Cole Brevard, defensive lineman out of Purdue. Brad Spence, linebacker via Arkansas by way of Klein Forest. And then also Jack Bomeister, the punter out of Utah. Now the other 2, Max Clare, tight end out of Purdue, has visited both Texas A&M, and is visiting Louisville, we believe, today. Eric Singleton, wide receiver, looking at Auburn, Ole Miss, Miami, among others, as well as Texas. He visited Texas on Tuesday. Texas has some issues right now. They need to find numbers in the portal at defensive line, right? They need to find other aspects as well. What's going on in the portal overall? Gerry, I'm going to start with you from a macro perspective. How do you see Texas performing in the portal thus far, and what's ahead of them?
Well, I love the 3 guys they have for the needs that this team has. I think they did really, really well there. Cole Brevard, over 500 snaps over the ball in Power 4 football. It's a huge win. And he's 6'3", 333. He's got SEC size. He's got experience. I really like that pickup. Brad Spence, I think, is an underrated pickup because he's just not ranked high in the portal rankings, which I think are the worst thing in our industry at this point. He's a really good player. He's ascending quickly in SEC, plays another pass rusher that can play off the ball at linebacker. I think they've done really well on defense with those 2 guys. And obviously, Bomeister's a 2-time all-conference pick. Just count how many guys there are actually in the portal that are that. And so all 3 need positions, and I think they've done a really good job there. Obviously, defensive line, they've got slots to fill. And I mentioned this even when Sadir, I think it was CJ, we talked about this a little bit. Even when it was announced Sadir was coming back, I said, we have to wait to get through the spring. Because with Sadir, it's always 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Well, now it's 2 feet out. You know he's gone, probably going to LSU. So can they do the rest of those guys stay? I mean, that's the question. Do the guys that are still on the roster stay? That's the thing we're going to have to watch out for. Texas needs 4. They need 3 for sure, maybe 4 in the portal defensive line. And the one thing is, I'm not in a rush with this, though. There's no panic buttons anywhere around me. Jermaine Lole was a late grab last year and ended up being the 3rd best interior player, maybe second against the run for sure. So there's that. And I think Texas will fill their needs. Sark plays the long game. It's not popular with the fans all the time in recruiting or portal, but if there's no panic in Austin, there's no panic on this set. That's what I'll tell you. I think they'll fill their needs over time.
Gerry, can I ask you the importance of adding defensive linemen now versus the spring? Is there a difference? Of course, you go through the spring, maybe getting those young cats some more, first, second team snaps.
That's a good point. I mean, I think that's on the table. It helps those guys now. Do you have enough guys to 2-spot practices like they want to do, right, Bobby? That's one of the things Sark's been really talking up. But it does get those guys more reps. There's no doubt about it. It gets Alex January more reps. Right. And I think they would love to add at least 1 more guy early and then see what happens in the spring. Because that's the one thing too is, and then we don't talk about right now, we're seeing coaches leave at weird times in college football. Some head coach somewhere could say, I've had enough, I'm retiring. It's unexpected. And they have a couple of really good players. Or somebody leaves a P5 job to go be an offensive coordinator, which we've seen. There's a lot of things that can happen. So I think that's why Sark has to be continue to be very patient, because there's so many unknowns in these crazy times we're in college football. But to your point, CJ, the young guys will definitely, all three of those guys will get a lot more reps if they only fill one more spot early.
Yeah.
I've got to say this. I mean, you look at the defensive tackle room now that Sadir Mitchell's returned to the portal. They returned Alex January and Melvin Hills. Full stop. Yeah. Any other defensive lineman they return interior? Not a one. So those three midterm guys, Josiah Sharma, Myron Charles, Justice Terry. Yeah, I think they're important to this Texas team. To be honest, Cole Brevard now coming in is a big one. So that gives Texas roughly 6, but for a fact, maybe one of the 3 freshmen may be ready. I mean, it's just a physical change going from high school football to the SEC. So they've got to do work in the portal at defensive tackle. I know that there are other positions. We mentioned Eric Singleton, the wide receiver. I think we could see Texas take a look at a running back here, CJ. Other positions as well, maybe corner. But they've got some work ahead of them still in the portal.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And you start looking at the roster projections and what could be the depth chart next year. Look, you already got a linebacker. Check that off the box. You start looking around, and I'll go back to defensive line real quick. I almost am to the point now where if they don't have 4 or maybe 5 years of experience, Texas isn't going to take a look at them. You look at what they did last year with Jermaine Lole, 5th-year guy at the time. Bill Norton, 5th-year guy at the time. Tia Savea, been in college for 4 years. I mean, it's the same thing with Cole Brevard now. I'm kind of to that point where it's almost a prereq for Texas to take a look at a portal guy. They have to be in college at least 3, maybe 4 years before they even, get involved. I don't know if that's for sure, but that's kind of where my mind's going, given their track record at the spot. But wide receiver is really interesting because they just hosted Eric Singleton for a visit this past weekend. Of course, Zach Branch is now in the portal. Where does Texas go when it comes to adding a guy with experience, with that big playability to fit in this offense? Of course, you like the downfield vertical attack of a DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo. How can you pair that up with a speedster? To me, Eric Singleton was a guy that made a whole lot of sense. 10-3 speed, 1,400 yards over the last 2 years. We'll see where that goes. But if it's not Singleton, is it Branch? A smaller body, a guy that you had essentially with Silas Bolden. You didn't see a whole lot of them this year. It'll be interesting to see where they go from there.
I want to add on D-line. The one difference between last year's portal D-line class and this one, Texas hired Johnny Nansen, and 2 guys that he coached came over.
That's a good point.
There's not that this year as of today. There would have to be a move on this coaching staff somewhere, and then you hire somebody, and guys hit the portal in the spring for there to even be a similar scenario. So that is one different scenario that Sark is working, and Jeff Banks and all those guys are working with in D-line portal recruiting this year. And on wide receiver, it'll be interesting. I tend to think the Branches will, because it's Zion and Zach Branch, will not be going to Texas. Because Zion Branch has had 3. He hasn't had a fully healthy season in 3 years. And are you really going to make him an NIL offer if he's not going to be in your top 4 or 5 safeties guaranteed? So that's going to be interesting as well. And there's 10 days left that the portal's still open. And then after teams losing the playoffs, there's a 5-day window there as well. I think there's going to be a little activity on that. And I'm not saying Texas is the front runner, going to get all the guys that jump in, but I do think there may be a little action there too, which will be interesting to follow.
I tell you what, you just look at the depth chart with Sadir going. I'm just telling you, defensive tackle got to get taken care of one way or the other, because you're not going into the SEC with 5 or 6 defensive tackles, of which only one has taken more than 100 snaps in a season, or 200.
What do you have against the full-time NASCAR package, Bobby?
Yeah, that's not going to work. That's not going to. I'll give you an example. Look, there are a couple teams on Texas' schedule next year that are going to be able to become big. Georgia, we know they've got big linemen. Florida ran the ball effectively against Texas, particularly in the second half. They've got Jaden Ball coming back, DJ Lagway. You know that Mississippi State had some success running the ball against Texas. They've got to replenish that defensive front. I think that's priority one in the portal. And then to y'all's point, a playmaker of sorts on offense. Just to add to this, one thing that maybe we need to monitor, though, Gerry, we've thought that Matthew Golden is likely going pro. I don't know that we've come off of that thought at this point, but if he were to return, what does that receiver room look like then? Do they need that additional speed guy? We'll see what happens. And I do want to say this one more thing about the portal. We'll probably see some more action from Texas players going into the portal.
Yes.
We've said that all along. We still believe that to be the case. A lot of them just waiting for this opportunity to get through the college football playoff because they have roles on this team of some level. So we'll see what that exactly means.
And then there's another piece to the portal real quick. Grad transfers that won't graduate now in December, but until after May. Yep. So there's other players out there that we can't even talk about right now that are going to end up being on the board for college teams.
There's a lot. I mean, a lot of different pieces, in my opinion. Really is. All right, that's going to do it for today's Stay of the Program, brought to you by our friend Adam Lowy of the Lowy Law Firm. Again, reach out to them, loweylawfirm.com. And don't forget about that ticket deal. Respond to their tweet, and you get a chance to win a pair of tickets to Texas versus Clemson. All right, Gerry and CJ, one last comment here for you guys. Score prediction, not so much. How do you see the game going itself? Like, what's the ebb and flow of this game? Is it Texas by 12, like the line says? Is it a tighter game? What do y'all's feel? CJ, I'll let you go first.
I do think this will be a relatively tight game to start. You've had essentially 2 weeks to come out with a game plan. Clemson, when they've had that amount of time, they've been good, right? You've talked about that game plan, that early start against SMU in the ACC championship game. I believe they scored 21 points in that first quarter. On the flip side, however, Clemson's been notoriously bad this year in the fourth quarter, especially defensively. And we've talked about the third quarter woes for Texas. Well, if you talk to anybody from Clemson, it's that final frame. And they're sitting 119th in the country at north of 10 points per game allowed in the fourth quarter alone. Again, you look back at that game. If it wasn't for a 56-yard field goal, you're going to overtime after allowing 17 points to SMU in that final frame. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I do think it'll be close. And then that home field advantage, that playing in that familiar territory for Texas, I think will pull them away in the second half.
And that speaks to Bobby's point about, and Dabo's hard-headedness about the portal. Lack of depth.
Yep.
Late in season, late in games, lack of depth in the fourth quarter start to show up as the season moves along. I'd said 34-21 earlier in the week. I'm going 34-20 for official prediction score. Look, and I'm not saying that's going to be all defensive points by Clemson. I can't just offensive points. I just can't bet on that based on what I've seen from Texas offensively in recent weeks. But I do think Texas is going to run the ball well. When a coach, one of the things I look at, when a coach comes out in this press conference start of the week, said, we got to have balance. He's not saying that for effect. That means he saw something on tape he really likes in the run game this week. I think Trey Weisner is going for 100-plus yards, and Texas will win the game, and they're going to control the line of scrimmage.
I love it. I hope that is the way it works, Gerry. But I got to tell you guys, at the end of the day, they are who you think they are at Texas right now, especially on offense. I don't think who they're playing necessarily fundamentally changes what they score. I mean, what has Texas scored in regulation the last 3 ball games or 4 ball games? 20 against Arkansas, 31 against Kentucky, 17 against A&M, and 16 in regulation against Georgia. So anywhere between 16 and 31 is who they are. Do you think Clemson has a worse defense than Arkansas? I mean, maybe because it's at home, it's a little different.
I do.
Okay, that's fair. But my point is, I think Texas will score somewhere between 17 and 24.
Yeah.
The key will be, how does Texas contain Kate Klubnik? To your point, the pass rush, the turnovers. Can they bait Kate Klubnik or that Clemson run? Can they bait them some which way that makes a big play? I don't know. I see a tight game, a defense first game, actually. So I'm gonna go somewhere in the 20 to 24 range, 17 to 24 range for Texas. My question mark right now is I don't know how I'm feeling on Cade Klubnik in that Clemson offense versus the Texas defense. That's going to be the key that I talk about. All right, that's going to do it for State of the Program, guys. CJ, you have something you want to add there?
I was going to say 24 points. That's kind of been the mark that I've been sitting on for about a month now. If Texas can hit that, I think they'll win just about every game they'll play moving forward.
That's a good point, too. I mean, there's a level of what they have to get to, right? Oregon and Penn State, I think, are the only two offensively that might be able to beat Texas in that regard because they've scored points against some good defenses. All right, that's going to do it for the State of the Program. Thanks again to Adam Lowy of the Lowy Law Firm. Thank you also to Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel, as well as our producer, Matt Hutchison. And thanks for all of you guys for tuning in. We'll see you again later today. We got a live stream at 7 o'clock. KJ Lacey, the Mobile quarterback commit, expected to join us on the live stream tonight. For CJ and Gerry, y'all have a good one. Hook 'em.